Have you ever looked like you had everything together, but inside you were falling apart? Well, that was the story of Stephen. To his coworkers, he was dependable. To his friends, he was funny and polite. To strangers, he looked calm. But most nights, Stephen sat alone in his car after work, gripping the steering wheel with trembling hands, trying to catch his breath. His heart raced. His chest tightened. His thoughts spun out of control, and the smallest things triggered it. A late bill, a comment from a coworker, even just silence. He often asked himself, "What's wrong with me? Why do I feel like I'm in danger when I'm not?" Friends told him to relax. Doctors said his body was fine. But inside, Stephen knew something wasn't right. What he didn't realize was that he wasn't weak. He wasn't broken. He was living in the aftermath of something most people never talk about. This is complex trauma. Now let me pause and ask you this. Have you ever felt your body react in ways you couldn't explain? Like your heart racing or your breath shortening even though you weren't in danger? If you've felt that before, type yes in the chat. How was Stephen's childhood like? He grew up in a house that looked fine on the outside. His clothes were clean, the house was tidy, and neighbors assumed everything was normal. But behind closed doors, things were very different. His father's silence filled the house. When his father did speak, it was often in anger. His mother, weighed down by her own struggles, was too tired to notice the pain Stephen carried. At 8 years old, Stephen would sit by the window waiting for his father to come home, hoping this time his father might smile, hoping this time he wouldn't explode. Some nights he was lucky, but most nights he wasn't. Stephen learned a painful truth early on. It was safer to stay quiet. Safer to stay invisible. Safer not to need anything from anyone. Psychologists call this experience attachment trauma, but to Stephen it was just life. He didn't have words for it. He just carried the weight of being unseen. Now let me pause and ask you this question. Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? Have you ever felt like nobody truly saw what you were going through? If you have, drop an emoji in the chat below. You never know. Your comment might remind someone else here that they aren't alone. At school, he smiled. He made jokes. He looked like he was fine. But inside, he was a storm. At night, he replayed every word he said. Did I sound stupid? Did I make them mad? He carried constant self-doubt, constant shame. Crowds overwhelmed him. Silence suffocated him. His body never felt calm. This is what psychologists call hypervigilance. The nervous system is locked in a state of alert, scanning for danger even when danger isn't there. To quiet his mind, he turned to distractions. Endless gaming, late-night scrolling, sometimes drinking alcohol, anything that gave him a moment of relief. But the relief never lasted. The mask was heavy, and the storm inside kept raging. Let me pause and check in with you. Can you relate to that mask? Pretending you're fine on the outside while struggling inside? If you can, type yes in the chat. By the time Stephen reached his teenage years, he had built a mask. By the time Stephen reached his teenage years, the mask followed him into adulthood. So, how does Stephen's early adulthood look like? At work, he was the overachiever. He said yes to every project. He stayed late, terrified of making mistakes. With friends, he was the dependable one, always listening, always showing up, never sharing his own pain. In relationships, he gave everything at first. But then fear crept in. Fear of being left. Fear of being truly seen. He would either pull away and create distance, or cling so tightly that his partners felt smothered. And when relationships ended, shame came rushing back. You ruin everything. You're unlovable. No one will ever stay. This one was Stephen's breaking point. One night, after yet another breakup, Stephen sat alone in his apartment. His chest was tight. His hands shook. His thoughts spiraled. I ruin everything. I can't do this anymore. Maybe it would be easier if I just disappeared. For the first time, Stephen realized this wasn't just sadness. It was despair. He was drowning. And that's when he decided to see a therapist. He expected judgment. He expected to hear that he was broken. But instead, the therapist looked at him and said, "Stephen, what you're describing is not weakness. It's complex trauma. These are not flaws. These are survival strategies your mind and body develop to keep you safe. For the first time, Stephen felt something different. Hope. Maybe he wasn't broken after all. Maybe he was wounded. And wounds can heal. Therapy wasn't easy. Stephen wanted a quick fix. He wanted to stop feeling so broken right away. But healing trauma doesn't work like that. His therapist began with small steps, grounding techniques. When Stephen felt overwhelmed, he would plant his feet on the ground, feel the floor beneath him, notice 5 things he could see, 4 things he could touch, 3 things he could hear, 2 things he could smell, 1 thing he could taste. Later, his therapist introduced him to EMDR therapy, guided eye movements that helped him process painful memories without drowning in them. At first, it felt strange, but slowly, the terrifying images of his childhood lost their sharp edges. The memories didn't vanish, but they no longer controlled him. Most importantly, Stephen learned about self-compassion. For years, his inner voice said, "I ruin everything." Now he practiced saying, "I did the best I could with what I had." It felt awkward at first, but over time, the new voice grew stronger. Healing wasn't perfect. There were setbacks, days when the storm returned, but for the first time, Stephen had tools. He had hope. He had a path forward. Let's pause and check in. When you feel overwhelmed, what helps you calm down? Share your coping skills in the chat. You might give someone else a new tool tonight. Over time, Stephen noticed changes. Arguments no longer sent him spiraling. He could pause, breathe, and choose how to respond. He started building friendships rooted in trust instead of fear. He even began to open up about his story, little by little, without shame. Most importantly, Stephen no longer saw himself as damaged. He saw himself as resilient. His past was real. His wounds were real, but they no longer defined his future. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant reclaiming. Stephen's story is not unique. There are countless people walking through life carrying invisible scars. Complex trauma can shape how we see ourselves and the world, but it does not have to control the rest of our lives. Healing is possible, slow, imperfect, but possible. So if you see yourself in Stephen's story, hear me clearly, you are not broken. You are human, and your story is still being written. If this story resonated with you, type healing in the chat. And remember, you are not alone. Help is available and waiting. Thanks for living, and I will see you in our next story. Do check out our other mental health educational videos.